I'm Amy Max, Program Manager for the California Opioid Safety Network at the Center for Health Leadership and Practice, a program of the Public Health Institute. You are about to watch a webinar that has been condensed from its original format to provide specific content regarding traditional and social media tips and tools. During the webinar, we will provide a quick overview of traditional and new media, how to incorporate media tactics into your communications plan, and some examples from local coalitions in the field. The subject matter expert for this webinar is Lori Cappy, a communications and social marketing consultant from IE Communications. Let's get started.
I'd like you to walk away today with some understanding of the basics of traditional and new media and understand how to use the templates and tools that we are provided. So those are our learning objectives. First of all, some definitions. So some of you may have heard people say, oh, we need to get some free media. Well, there's no such thing really as free media. It always takes time and effort to get the attention of the media, and even a so-called public service announcement is going to cost you to produce. I try to caution people to not think, oh, if we just do X, Y, and Z, we'll get some free media. No, you're going to have to either pay for it or earn it. So things like billboards, bus shelter ads, lifestyle materials, radio and TV and print ads, some online social media advertising. These are all examples of paid media. The advantage of paid media is you completely control the message. Earned media is both proactive, so when you plan an event and send out a press release, organize an event, that's you proactively determining in your communications plan, for example, when you think media is going to help further a particular strategic objective. Reactive media is when you submit an op-ed or a letter to the editor or a Medium or blog post or work through Twitter, and these are when you see a particular news item or event and you want to react to it. I just wanted to give you high level some of the basics. To do paid media, you need to develop or design what are your creative content. There might be ways that you could develop or design a creative content either in an ad, a billboard, or a radio script. Your next step is to connect, or simultaneous is to connect with an outlet and find out how much it costs, and then purchase the space or the time. And be strategic when you purchase the space or the time. So, for example, if you're trying to reach 35 to 45-year-olds through radio, you might ask for drive time radio or an adjacency around, 8:30 in the morning, because that's when you're most likely to reach that demographic. It's not as expensive as you think, but there's huge ranges. So earned media is the other category I want to talk about it. And the reason, not just me, but a lot of communications professionals call it earned media is because you got to work hard to get it. And it can be pretty competitive. So earned media is used to support your strategies by raising public awareness. It's something that you should incorporate into your communications plan. And earned media can include both traditional and new media. Traditional media are things like print, broadcast, radio, and then social media are obviously the things like Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. So the one thing I will say is, while the key difference is methods and materials, what methods or materials you're using that distinguishes traditional, new, and social, the other thing to understand is you may reach different audience, although it is a trend that blends. So you're more likely to reach my age demographic with traditional media, but I also consume online media. But, don't stereotype who listens to or who reads or consumes where. But one point I want to make here is it should always be the same messaging, and it always should include a call to action. So now the other definition I wanted to reinforce with you all is the difference between proactive and reactive. Proactive media is getting ahead of the story to advance your strategy, and it's on your time. So that's announcements, new data, events. Reactive is responding to events, news reports, and it requires keeping up with the news, monitoring the media. Reactive media includes op-eds, letters to the editor, and blog posts. Okay, so I'm going to take a little pause here and say, how do you actually operationalize this in your communications plan? Here are some sample story angles These are story angles that to support your strategies and to include in your communications plan. To think ahead of what might be ways to raise awareness in the media. So some of the story angles are things like community events. So, for example, Take Back Days. I love the Take Back Days from the perspective that it is a terrific opportunity to raise awareness of the extent of the opioid epidemic in your community and to highlight the fact that I think it's 50%, Turner, something like 50% of opioid prescriptions end up being, misused or abused. Data is always good, but I like to also include stories in your data. So, just having the data report isn't always that impactful. But if you then get to things like the collateral damage, like the number of foster children, an increase in child welfare entries, and then have a profile, you're likely to have, a good story that the media will pick up. Another good story angle is new alliances to demonstrate community involvement. Recently, the Yurok tribe started working with the local drug court. The Yurok tribe has been very heavily hit by the opioid epidemic, and that alliance got some media. Another one that you see often is what I call the bad actor stories, stories about how the drug companies have misinformed the public, things like pill mills. Those are other good stories. You need some templates and tools. So on a proactive basis, those are media advisories, press releases, op-eds, which can be both, a blog or Medium post or Twitter or Facebook. Once you've seen some story in the media that you want to respond to, the reactive tools are things like letters to the editor, op-eds. So the other tool you need is a press release. And the idea of a press release is basically you're writing the story for the media, which is essentially very important these days because most newsrooms, there's been incredible consolidation in the media, and they just don't have the journalists. So the more you can, give them everything filled in, the more likely you are to get coverage. So I like to encourage people to do press releases and basically think of, I'm writing the story. Here's an example, Alameda County. Here was, and if you read this, they wrote the story for the media. They gave the quotes, they gave the data, they gave why it matters. So they basically played the role of the journalist. Here's an example also from Marin County, so another coalition that sent out their news release. Again, they wrote the story. They gave the quotes, they gave it why this matters, they gave the data, etc. Another tool that I want to encourage you to use is op-eds. And op-eds refers to opposite the editorial page. So on the left-hand side, those of you who read print, you'll see usually the editorials and the letters to the editor. And on the right side of the page, you'll see the op-eds. And op-eds are opinion pieces or commentary. And the idea of an op-ed is that you get the opportunity to promote a perspective. The most important reason to do op-eds, and I really encourage in all my policy advocacy work, is who reads op-eds. So who reads op-eds are policymakers and legislators. So if you want to reach them, get an op-ed in, which means op-eds are super competitive. I forgot the exact numbers, but I believe the New York Times gets a couple of hundred op-eds submitted every day. And they're going to choose two. And who do you think they're going to choose? They're going to choose somebody who's well-known. So that's why you're going to see op-eds by academics or scientists or, people who I call the notables and quotables. And you're not going to see that many op-eds by, your average person out there. Now, there's exceptions, and I just do not want to discourage you from writing an op-ed, but I will say that they're very competitive. Given that, do you want to spend a lot of time working on an op-ed? Probably not. But in your local paper, you probably have a way better chance than you do in the New York Times. Probably the legislators that represent your district, they have a staffer who's reading those op-eds. So it's still a good conduit. So I don't want to, by telling you it's competitive, I don't want to dissuade you from trying. Here was our stars. of Humboldt County who did get a piece in response to the New York Times. I just can't tell you what a coup this is that they got this, because this got a lot of eyeballs. Another way to get your perspective into the media is letters to the editor. And here is a template, and I want to give a shout out to the Berkeley Media Studies Group. I borrowed their template because I like their template. And it's a good tool to signal interest about a particular issue to policymakers and influential stakeholders. And letters to the editor, while competitive, are way less competitive. And there's something that you can also do online. When you see an article, you can put in your response or comments, which is basically the same thing as a letter to the editor. So you can send it in by to a print outlet, or you can also send it in online. So what's important is that you always keep it short, respond quickly, mention the reason for your response. So always, clue them in. I am responding to the article that depicted addiction as a moral failing. I have a different perspective on this based on my experience and, the meta-analysis that have been done by health professionals over the last 20 years. So you would get your perspective in that way if you kind of right from the beginning signal what this is in response to and why. That's your template. So this was one that I published about abuse of prescription drugs is a Marin problem, and included some very good data as well as a call to action. So the third thing I want to cover when I'm talking about both the proactive and reactive earned media is the role of spokespeople. So Matt from Marin is the identified spokesperson for the Marin County work. I don't know how many of you have actually identified who is your local spokesperson. If you haven't, I would like to encourage you to make it clear who is that person, because once you start doing this media outreach, and if you should be so lucky and the media follow up, you need to be able to say, oh, I'm happy for you to speak to, Karia, who will be able to answer any of your questions. That identified spokesperson has to be available to be interviewed, either by phone or via email. So first identify that spokesperson, and then as you start doing your proactive or your reactive media, always be sure that you've prepared that person. You should have developed talking points, the key messages. Again, go back to our first webinar and anticipate what Q&A they may have, what questions and what your answers might be. Towards this end, media training can be a really useful thing. General interview tips are really important for your whoever is your spokesperson, because once you've gone through all this trouble to earn some media, you want to be sure that the media has somebody to follow up with, who is accessible, who is positioned as an expert, who's prepared, and whose responses are tailored to that particular media outlet. Again, if you should be so fortunate to get a reporter engaged with you and actually be doing an interview, important to keep focusing on your message, be concise, illustrate with statistics or anecdotes, avoid jargon, keep control of your interview, and use bridging. And if somebody's asked a question that's really off topic or sort of negative, the bridging is to say, wow, that's a really good question. But what I think it's really important to know is, so you've probably noticed that. So a few don'ts. Don't do it cold. Don't give information that you think may be true. Don't say anything off the record. There's no such thing. And don't repeat negative questions in your answers. Wow, isn't addiction a moral failing? No, addiction isn't a moral failing. Well, guess what's going to be the lead? Addiction is a moral failing. So you never answer the question by repeating the negative phrase. I now want to switch us to the new media, which are things like social media and blogs and Medium pages. So to begin with that, you need to think of who are your target audiences. And I know I kind of talked a lot about that in the webinar on your communications plan. Who do you need to reach and why? If you need to reach a younger cohort, if you need to reach health professionals, if you need to reach law enforcement, think about who you need to reach and what that target demographic is. And then what type of content do you already have, or what kind of content do you want to create? So those are some of the considerations when you try to determine what platforms you're going to use and when and where. So the major platforms are Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Medium. So for Facebook, the thing to understand these days is almost half of Facebook users are over the age of 35. So if you think you're not going to reach the public health officials in your community who maybe are in that age cohort, you are. The other thing about Facebook in terms of content is that photos, charts, graphs, visuals do really well. So if you have some of that content that you can repurpose on Facebook, I would encourage that. To get a good Facebook presence, you really need to be posting on a daily or at least weekly basis, and to check your feed for duplicate or recent posts. Anytime possible, include an image, add a video. And another way to make friends is to share other partners' organizations' posts, which encourages their sharing of your posts. So there's definitely a quid pro quo in the Facebook world. The other thing is you can always pull from newsletters, reuse, and repurpose. So you don't always have to create a lot of original content. So another social media platform is Instagram. This kind of shocked me when I kind of saw the statistics on this. They have more than 800 million active users. 500 million are active daily users. And Instagram users engage more on weekdays, close to 60% skew young, 18 to 29. And you can use hashtags just like Facebook and Twitter. So for those of you who kind of question, well, what could Instagram really do for this issue? Isn't that just pictures? Well, here's an example. Here's a picture that advertised the Western States Opioid Summit. There's all kinds of ways that Instagram now can communicate quickly and well. Of course, there's Twitter. Tweets can be longer than they were at the beginning, but the cautionary note is that still around 100 characters gets the most attention. They're time sensitive, so make sure they tweet quickly and often. More than 70% of Twitter users have at least some college education, and consider others. So the big thing about Twitter, similar to Facebook, is you don't always have to come up with a lot of original content. Retweeting is perfectly acceptable and a good idea. Hashtags, as many of you know, are part of the whole vocabulary of Twitter. So using hashtags as a way to aggregate comments, only use 1 to 2 per tweet. If you're using a term in your tweet, you don't need to repeat it as a hashtag. So if you're talking about naloxone, you don't have to then do hashtag naloxone. Here's some of the hashtags that are already out in the Twitter sphere. So here's a couple of examples of types of tweets. So this is one that was sent out by the California Public Health Department. Here's another one that is which was an announcement or call to action, and then here's one that's a retweet. Another kind of tweet is called a quote tweet, sharing your voice from the community. So, and as you can see, they basically took this pretty cool quote from this Sonia Huber and retweeted it. Here's an example of an event tweet where there was attention to be brought to the families at the state capitol. And blogs allow you to moderate and share content in a readable, media-friendly format. It can be used in lieu of the more competitive traditional media releases or op-eds. And you can, once you do a good, if you do a well-written blog, you can cross-promote it on other platforms like Facebook or Twitter. Medium is an online publishing platform that is being frequently used. It gives you the ability to do op-ed style statements. It's a great venue for posts longer than 280 characters. Recommended read time is about 3 to 5 minutes. So here's a blog post example from the California Healthcare Foundation. Hey, repurpose it again as a blog post so it can extend the story that you already got. Here's another Medium post example that I thought was very impactful. but I want to make sure that all of you realize how important it is to do the back-end work. So the distribution tools, if you don't have an email marketing service, get one, MailChimp, Constant Contact, etc. Think about your neighborhood news sites, Patch.com, Nextdoor.com. Many of these neighborhood news sites are very useful for posting news release and events like Take Back Days or Awareness Days. Local radio listservs or community-hosted news calendars, use that as well as Facebook, because those are good ways to reach people who maybe aren't Facebook friends with you. So you should have a database for your key audiences, healthcare, elected officials, media. Keep your information up to date. It's a constant battle because contacts in your database will have outdated information, and other important social media links for contacts in your database, as well as including phone numbers, organization names, and a mailing address. A database is an essential tool. If you don't have a website up yet, work on it. The media and the public need a place to follow up on your call to action if you are so lucky as to get this kind of media outreach. And if you don't have a Facebook page, same thing, work on it. And don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And if you don't have a Facebook page, same thing, work on it.
Thank you for watching this video. Please visit our website, CaliforniaOpioidSafetyNetwork.org, to access templates, tools, and resources, information on funding opportunities, and more videos in this learning series on opioid safety strategies and coalition development.